Hi, and welcome to the University of Minnesota Alumni Association's webinar series. My name is John Ruzek, and I'm the Senior Director of Alumni Networks here, and your host today. Thanks to everyone who's joining us, wherever you may be. It's a nice chilly day here in Minnesota. December's finally caught up with us. And today we have a great independent career coach and consultant who's joining us to give her top 5 tips for a successful career change, and then we'll be leaving plenty of time for your questions as well. Today's webinar is part of an ongoing free series being offered by the University of Minnesota Alumni Association, where we're having conversations with experts about career, life, and learning topics. And initiatives like these are made possible in part by our Alumni Association members. So thank you to all of our members. And because of our members, we can make powerful opportunities for students and our more than 466,000 alumni around the world. And if you're interested in joining us, just visit umnalumni.org/membership. This is the final webinar for the fall semester for December, last but not least. And we will have some upcoming ones coming up in spring. Just a little preview. We're going to have someone talking about creating your own personal board of advisors for your career purposes. Richard Leiter, the best-selling author, will be joining us again to talk about managing life transitions. We'll have some other coaches talking about professional presence and creating a meaningful career. And then also some life topics like healthy meal prep on a budget and using a budget to gain financial control. And those are not up yet, but they will be at umnalumni.org/virtual come January. Before we get started, let me just go over a few housekeeping items about GoToWebinar. You have joined this presentation listening using your computer speaker system by default. If you would prefer to listen over the telephone, just select telephone in the audio pane of your GoToWebinar panel and dial-in information will be displayed. If you experience audio difficulties while listening via your computer speakers, this can be caused by having multiple software applications open or perhaps tuning in on a wireless signal versus something hardwired. So feel free to close any unnecessary applications or move off a wireless signal. After Jill presents today, we will have plenty of time for questions and answers, and your questions and comments are welcome, and you can submit them in the questions pane on your GoToWebinar control panel. We'll be monitoring them along the way, so let us know you're out there, and this is going to be a fun presentation. It is now my pleasure to introduce colleague Jill Howler, who is the founder and principal consultant at Leadership Refinery, a career and leadership development consulting firm in the Twin Cities. She has over 15 years of experience in global talent management, leadership assessment and coaching, and career strategy and transition. She has worked in and with global organizations, higher education, and professional services firms. Jill specializes in coaching high potential individuals through career changes and accelerated development, using a future-focused and strength-based approach to create sustainable change. Jill earned her Bachelor's of Arts degree in Communication and German from the University of Minnesota Duluth System Campus, all right, and her Master of Arts in Communication from Bethel University with an emphasis in conflict management and emotional intelligence. Jill, great to have you here.
Thank you, John. It's a pleasure to be here. Well, to get started today, thinking about, before we get into Q&A, let's start with what I think are some current and relevant top 5 tips for a successful career change. And as we do that, I'd like to get to know a little bit more about you as an audience. So, John, let's have our first poll question. First thing I'd like to know is, why are you here today? Those of you who are participating in this webinar, love to know a little bit about what motivates you to be here today. Perhaps you're an active job seeker, currently looking for the next great opportunity in your career. Maybe you are planning ahead. You know that 2017 is going to bring some change for you, and you plan to get active in that job search in the next calendar year. Maybe you are a little bit more of a passive job seeker, meaning you wouldn't mind being found, by a recruiter or another company in the near future. And maybe last option is digging the well. That's based on the Harvey Mackay book, Dig the Well Before You're Thirsty, really thinking about, you know or understand that you're going to need a change in the future, and you want to be as prepared as possible. So you're way ahead of the game here in digging the well. So let's take a moment and see what our results are. We've got some active job seekers here. So more than half of about half of you are saying you're an active job seeker. You can see the results here. 25% of you, the next largest category, planning to start a job search in the new calendar year. And the next group, digging the well. So we've got some people who are active in the search, planning to be active in the search, and just trying to get ahead of the curve. Great, thanks for letting us know a little bit more about you. Next up, I'd love to learn a little bit more about where you are in your career. This will help me kind of tailor some of the responses and the tips to who you are. So if you're a current student or someone who's just graduated, maybe less than a year of professional experience in whatever field you're in, that would be you. If you're early career, let's just give you the first 5 years out. I call it developing career. This is where some significant changes and growth can happen in that 5 to 15 years of experience. A more seasoned career person, 15 to 30 years of experience, and later in the career, 30 plus. So let's see who we've got here joining us on today's webinar. Thanks, John. So right now it looks like the good majority of you are seasoned career professionals. So we're looking at people with 15 to 30 years of experience. Next up looks like a tie, early career and developing career. So far it doesn't look like we have a lot of current students and a few representatives of the late career. So this is really helpful. Thank you. Seasoned career folks in an active job search. That's how I would categorize the majority of people who are with us here today. Okay, so first tip coming from yours truly, I would say is strategize. I know the word gets overused. And let me tell you what I mean by that. I think it's so critical to remember that great careers don't happen by accident. And so what I would say as it relates to that, it's important to know where you're headed. And so a strategy around a career search, a job transition, even just finding something that's more fulfilling or utilizes your talents and strengths more than what you have currently or what you've had in the past, I think a good strategy needs to involve your purpose. Do you know what you really want to do in your work life as a working professional? What meaning does that have for you in your life? What role? Is there a specific type of role that is the best fit for you or where your talents can be best utilized? Of course, the culture in which you work, whether that's by department or by the overall organization, culture is really important, and the more you know, the better fit you'll ultimately have. Of course, the field. We probably have people from lots of different fields joining us here on the webinar today, and so being kind of clear on what fields are in the game and what fields are not, I think is important as you build a strategy for a job change. Industry matters for some, for others it doesn't, but if it does matter to you, then it's important to make the list of what's in and what's out. And then I mentioned briefly also thinking about fit. I think these are all questions that need to be answered in tip number 1, as a person should have a strategy and approach to their overall job search. So next up, I'll go into tip number 2, and that is a proactive versus reactive approach to the job change. I think it's so very important to plan when it comes to a proactive versus reactive job search. And I would say not only myself, but many experts in the field of career development would agree that proactive beats reactive hands down. So what do I mean by proactive? It's really an assessment of how you're spending your time. So searching for job postings, or scanning the internet for industry job boards or generic job boards like Indeed, that's a reactive job search. That's responding to things that are current jobs that are open. That's a lot different than proactively planting some seeds or getting to know people who work in the field that you're interested in working in. And so, my advice is items 3, 4, and 5 up here on the screen. Being proactive means attending events, either in the field you're in or the field you want to be in, or events that are held by people who are in roles that you'd like to be in. Definitely meeting new people, people who've had roles or jobs like you're interested in. Maybe they're currently in jobs that you're interested in. Maybe they just hang out with the right people. And that goes to connecting, really making sure that you're in the right place at the right time, meeting with people and asking them, who else should I be talking to? Who is hiring for positions like ones that I'm looking for, or I'm qualified for, or I'm excited about, or that bring my passion to life? And adding those connections in a proactive way so that ultimately you find out about roles maybe before they're posted, and you've got a step ahead of the people who are just in a reactive job search. So a general rule of thumb that I give to clients and I've given for years is, in the balance of spending your time, how much time should be spent on reactive versus proactive things in your job search? My general rule is this is an 80-20 split. 80% of your time should be spent on proactive things like networking events, coffee meetings, taking someone out to lunch, or learning about the field in a proactive way. And 20% should be spent on reacting to jobs that are either posted or maybe a lead that somebody gives to you that's a job that's already out there. Because in an ideal situation, if you want to be a rock star candidate, your application and the company's applicant tracking system would be more of a formality, because people already know who you are and they know what your talents and capabilities are, and they've even hopefully met you. Some influential people in that organization have met you and are excited about you. They're looking for your name, seeking it out in the list of everybody who's applied, rather than reacting to you being an unknown candidate in the system. So that's the rule or guideline or even aspiration for a proactive versus a reactive job search. My next tip is short versus long. And specifically when I'm talking about this, I'm referring to resumes. And this is an interesting shift that's been happening, in a trend that I would like to talk about. It used to be that long resumes were the ideal, that made sense, and it showed that you were established and credible in your field. But these days, recruiters are not alone in the land of short attention spans. And so it's so very important to make a really quick, positive first impression. And so I see far more people, candidates at all levels of their careers, including at the executive level, having a one-page resume, having a one-page kind of a marketing brochure, and then also having the more developed, maybe longer, probably not more than 2-page resume. Now, I know that there are some fields that still favor the CV, and so that certainly is a different approach. Often values a longer inclusion of all kinds of appendices and publications and speaking events and things of that nature. So definitely go with what's expected in the field that you're in. But I think every field, no matter what role you're in, can benefit from having a one-page sort of marketing profile. And it becomes important in networking activities as well. But because people are really these days making very quick decisions off of a glance, sometimes people have really valuable, beneficial information about their career and their achievements on page 2 or 3 of their resume, and it's just never getting seen. So my advice is, while long is still important in some cases, everybody also needs a short version of their resume, or actually think of it more like a brochure or a marketing profile to really get people's attention.
Jill, can I ask you a question about resumes? This has come up in a few webinars this fall.
Yeah.
With people kind of wrestling with the question of, I think it's the summary section, if that's in fashion or out of fashion now. What's your take on that for resumes?
I would say the summary section or career highlights, or there's lots of ways that you can label that on a resume or on a profile. I would say it is in fashion, particularly for people who have 10 or more years of experience. So again, it's that quick glance, high level, here's what you'll get when you get to know me. I think that that's really important. It's less beneficial for people who are very early in their career, because the meat and the bulk of what they've accomplished is really right there at the top of the resume anyway. So since we have a majority of people on the call here today who are in that 15 to 30 year experience range, I would say definitely create the one-page profile that will serve you well, and also consider having that career summary or highlights panel very close to the top so that people can get a quick glimpse of who and what you are.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. All right, tip number 4, in my view, and a lot of people that I work with, is this approach of increasing visibility. And what I mean by that is we want to make sure that not only are you searchable, but that you like what you see. What others see is what you want them to see when it comes to looking you up, Googling you, finding a profile of you on LinkedIn, whatever those things might be. Many of us have lots of strong presence online through various platforms. Be aware of what people will see when they look you up and take control of that. If it's a passive thing for you, I would say make it an active thing, especially if you are in a job search or anticipating a job search. And I think specifically when it comes to making a career change, I think increasing your visibility so that you are more of a known entity and not just a name in a list of applicants is really important. So here are some ideas that I have and how to do that. The first is attending industry events. So whether you're staying in the same industry that you've been in the past, or you're ready for some kind of industry change, find out where those people are hanging out and get there. This time of year especially, lots of organizations have a holiday event. Maybe it's an organizational fundraiser. Maybe it's something that they do early in the spring. Get those events on your calendar, follow them, make sure that when you can fit those in, you are attending those and you've got your story ready, you've got your elevator pitch, your networking pitch about why you're there, and really use that as an opportunity to meet people. Another opportunity there is professional associations. So maybe there's a specific field that you're in, whether it's engineering or human resources or you name it, there are professional associations everywhere, and some of them are very active and have lots of opportunities to be seen and network and meet people. So those are another great opportunity for you to increase your visibility. Again, for those of you who are digging the well, start getting out to those things before you really need a job, because then you'll be a little bit of a known quantity before the interviewing and the job application process really begins. I'll put in a little plug here for John and the alumni networks. It's a really great opportunity. You can do a lot of these things online as well, so you don't have to necessarily drive across town or be local to the Twin Cities or Minnesota to be a part of industry events or professional associations or alumni groups. Many of them have a strong presence on social media. You can pose questions, you can respond to discussions that happen in a lot of these forums, and it just kind of helps. You can solidify your own expertise, you can talk about what you need, what you have to offer, and that can be a really great place for people to increase their visibility as well. I'll throw out student memberships. I know that we had kind of a smaller population of current students who are participating in the webinar today, but many organizations have discounted rates for current students. Whether you're a graduate student or you're going back 20 years later for a PhD, take advantage of those student memberships because you still get the great opportunities to mingle and network and rub elbows with all the decision makers in the field or the industry that you're interested in, and you can do it at a much lower rate. So certainly would encourage people to take advantage of that. I mentioned the social media piece. Again, you don't have to necessarily dedicate every night of the week or every weekend to attending events, but really be aware of, and if you don't know, ask around. Where are people hanging out in social media? I know for myself professionally, there are lots of online groups and forums that I'm a part of where I can ask questions, I can answer questions. It raises my visibility as a credible expert in my own field, and I get lots of good information from other people as well. So definitely take advantage of that. And my last comment here on the increasing visibility is maybe my own personal bias, but I definitely take a give and take mentality to the networking and visibility process. And what I mean by that is try to offer something up to people that you meet along the way as well. Maybe they're looking for something or someone and you're not the right person, but you might know someone who could be the right connection for them, might be the right resource for them, could be the right vendor or solution or consultant for them. So try to take a give approach in these situations as much as you may come at it with your own sort of needs and hope to take things away from it as well. Next tip is etiquette. So there are a couple of things here that I want to talk about when it comes to etiquette. And I'm giving you sort of like the what to do, what not to do. And for me, a not to do is sending a resume to somebody when they have not asked for it. To me, I've always seen that as being a bit presumptuous and assuming that this person knows what to do with it or how to help. Instead, I would certainly encourage, again, that marketing profile that I mentioned a little bit earlier, a one-page, a quick hit type of summary of who you are. That is far more appropriate to send in advance of maybe a coffee meeting, or just as you're networking and saying, hey, if you know anyone who's looking for my skill set, this is kind of who I am and what I do. That one page is less presumptuous and is much more palatable for people when they receive that. Now, if somebody asks you for your resume, by all means, follow up on that right away and get it in their hands. I also want to just focus on some of the really good etiquette around networking and interviewing and all these things that I think most of us already know, but definitely follow up. Even if you get a rejection, even if you get news that you didn't want to hear, or the job is not, you were the top candidate, everything was perfect, but the position's on hold indefinitely, follow up, be gracious, thank people for their time, reciprocate in networking situations where possible, share some things with people that they might not otherwise know or have access to. You may come across a great article that's related to a conversation you had with somebody at a networking event, or related to a problem that they're stuck on and trying to solve. Be generous, offer up that solution, offer to brainstorm with them, just being professional in those scenarios. And my last item here, of course, is patience. These processes can sometimes take so much longer than we as candidates can fathom or recognize all the details that are happening behind the scenes, and shifting schedules and shifting priorities that, quite frankly, are usually kept from us. So don't lose hope and keep a positive attitude if you're in a process with an organization, because these things really do take a considerable amount of time. I want to end with a tip on past versus future. And I see this happen so often with people as they're making a career change. What I see is people focusing very heavily on the past, what the company asked you to do, what you did, kind of a regurgitation of job description, maybe the knowledge or the abilities or the results that you gave for that company. And what we're missing out on is an opportunity to position you for the future. So really be thinking about, what are you capable of? And so the advice I give is try to make sure, not only in your marketing brochure, in your resumes, but also in how you talk about yourself when you're at these industry events or when you're posting things on social media. Be forward-looking. Talk about where you're going with the skills and the things that you've learned, and less about how that worked in the past. Of course, that's going to remain important, but I think people who do a good job of articulating this in a forward motion tend to perform better in this process. So, and I also think it's better for your own branding, your personal branding, your professional branding, in the language that you use in your resume and the stories that you tell. If you can clearly connect how something you've done or achieved in the past relates to a trending issue, an industry issue that's coming up, technology change, however you can sort of frame your own agility and what you've learned and how you can take that forward, I think is a really good way to differentiate yourself from others in this kind of competitive landscape in careers. So those are my tips, and at this point I'm ready to open it up for questions, John.
All right, everybody, this is the Q&A part of the webinar. So if you have questions, type them into the question box on your GoToWebinar panel, and we'll field them as they come in, and Jill will take her best crack at it. And as we wait for some of those questions from the audience, I think one thing, since, if I remember right from the first poll, that we have people kind of in the job search, maybe a little bit more seasoned. Mm-hmm. What about if you are in that 15 to 30 year range, but you're wanting to make a pretty significant career change? Because that's oftentimes a question, we'll get, like, what are just some of the just touch points that you would start walking somebody through as they're, maybe wanting to go from being a teacher to going into nonprofit, or from corporate to something else? Or
yeah, I see that a lot, especially after someone has that amount of time and experience in a career, and they realize maybe they're not fulfilling their own purpose, or they want to get involved in something that may be more either mission driven or connected to their own personal values. And I think we see that happen a lot in that 15 to 30 year range. That's when people start to get clearer on who they are and what they want to be doing. So I would say general advice in that area is, you can expect that there are going to be some challenges, and that the responsibility is on you as a candidate to help somebody else see the connections between what you've done in the past and what you're capable of in the future. So again, back to that piece of advice on future focused, really thinking about what skills have you learned and what have you done in your past work that makes you really relevant, and have something to offer for what's happening for that organization or that role or that industry looking into the future. So I also think doing research, like really being aware of, and some of the things that I talked about here, being visible. In that example you gave, John, of having been a teacher and now wanting to work in the nonprofit space, I would say making sure that you are joining organizations, attending events where all their nonprofit leaders or decision makers are going to be spending their time, so you can become, with patience, you can become a little bit more of a visible figure and someone that people know and they understand your story, where you're trying to go. And even if they don't specifically themselves have the right opportunity in their organization, if you make great impressions, they'll be inclined to be helpful. I generally think people like to be helpful in these situations, and will help make some of those connections for you. If you keep showing up, you have a positive message, you see where your skills and talents can help organizations in the future, people will step in and help pave the way for you.
Excellent. One question we have from a attendee is that let's say if someone's kind of middle-aged, 40, 45 range, and maybe they're in that career transition and looking to start to try to carve out some of that experience, whether through internships or more entry-level positions. But to the person's question, like perhaps recruiters are more looking at straight out undergraduate, 22-year-olds. Mm-hmm. How would someone at mid-career or middle age kind of pursue maybe those internship routes, or talk with recruiters about how that, they could maybe be in those entry-level positions? Yeah,
I think that's a particularly tough one, especially I think I'll just speak from the business landscape. When organizations have a prescribed internship program, typically they're looking for not just fresh talent or newly minted, whatever that is, and whatever degree it might be, but they're looking for an investment that they can make in the longer haul. And so I think it's incredibly tough for people with some or significant experience to try to compete with that or make the case for that. I think a better route might actually be volunteer work. Working on projects, finding organizations. Maybe it's, it's a PTA that needs technology help, and that's the field that you want to get into, right? And so like being a bit of a self-study, taking courses online or through the university, and showing that you are really getting ready for that type of career, and building some project experience through other avenues is probably going to be at least one avenue to get their attention, other than trying to compete for an internship with recent undergrads. I think they're just not going to see the connection.
Here, another question that came in. This is from a PhD student here at the U, and we hear this a lot as far as sometimes PhD students maybe transitioning into industry. But this person's a PhD student in chemistry, and the question is, what steps can I take to go into management consulting jobs? Also is taking like online courses from Coursera, Data Camp, etc. helpful in this regard? So probably, graduate student transitioning to industry versus maybe academia or research.
Yeah. I've seen a few great examples of this. So a technical PhD, whatever that might be, interested in going into management consulting. I think that that is a tough hill to climb. So understanding that is important to you, it certainly can be done, but the real value there comes from networking. So again, making sure that the organizations know who you are, you have a plan, you put a strategy in place. If you don't know how to do that, you work with someone who can help you figure out which organizations do I need to be spending some time with. How do I make sure that people know my background? While my background might be technical, here's how I see it applying in the consulting space. Find other people who have made that leap or that journey before you and talk to them about how they got there. All of that comes from good networking and finding out how to do that. So I think it can be done. I've seen it happen many times, but it takes a concerted effort in that area.
Here's a question from a recent graduate, and her question is, how long should I stay with my first job? I've been here about 3.5 years. I really like most things about it, but I see no path for promotion in the small organization. How would you kind of field that one?
Yeah, that's interesting. I've heard people kind of talk about like there is for some people a sort of 3 to 4 year rule that if I'm not growing and changing and challenging myself, and I'm one of those people who feels that desire to continue to be self-actualized, to continue to be continuously improving myself and whatever that might be, that there is sort of a lifespan in how long someone can stay. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean with the organization, but smaller organizations tend to have fewer opportunities to maybe make a change. I also really encourage people to very strongly think about lateral moves and lateral job changes. Many companies, many employers, many managers really value someone who can see the benefit in taking their skill set and doing it somewhere else, applying their abilities in another part of the organization that might not be as traditional or might not be as well laid out. Maybe no one's ever paved that path before, but not just thinking about career as a way to move up, but a way to move across and expand maybe a skill set, or just take on a new challenge and be engaged in learning something new. That can really scratch that itch or fulfill that void for somebody. If you do like the organization and you do like the people that you're working with, I mean, that is right there, something that other people really strive to find. So if you've got some of those things, maybe you can find other ways to apply your skills in other departments and other areas. Or I see other people find ways of fulfilling those needs by leading project teams or leading a committee for sustainability or something else that's maybe mission driven within the organization, maybe leading an affinity group if the organization is large enough to do something like that. That can be a way to kind of re-engage and add something new to the plate without feeling like you have to completely leave.
Thank you. Another question, what things should I consider when negotiating a salary for a new job?
Oh boy.
Maybe like the top three things.
Yeah. As you know, there are lots of things to consider when negotiating a salary for a new job. So you're specifically saying salary. So I would, from that question, maybe conclude that salary is one of the priorities for you in this process. If it hadn't been stated so in that way, I might have said something else about prioritize what's important to you. But even with negotiating a salary for a new job, I would suggest, first and foremost, do your homework, know what is a competitive rate for that type of role, and know your own worth. That may or may not be in line with what you're currently being paid or what others get paid for the type of work that you're doing, especially if you're making some kind of a shift, right? It's really important to get at that information. And I recognize that that's very hard because we as a culture don't have a very transparent, view on talking about how much money we make. And there are lots of discussions about whether that's right or wrong, but it's very hard to get your hands on that information. But research it all the same so that you have really good information when you want to go in and say, I think I deserve X. You've offered me X and I think I deserve Y. You need to be able to back that up with some evidence because they have their own research and benchmarking and information that they look at compared with other organizations. And most companies, I feel like, want to make a fair offer. They're not necessarily trying to get cheap help, but they do have financials and budgets to maintain and equity that they often are looking at as well. So understand that they're coming at it from a good intention. If you're coming at it from a good intention, make sure you know what's marketable and know what it differentiates you from others in the market. So being really clear on kind of what your value proposition is, those are things I think you need to reiterate when you're at that salary negotiation stage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think a lot of times I'll hear from people as far as sometimes the forgotten thing is the total compensation, and whether it's the current job you're at and, maybe your salary is lower, but with some other things with retirement benefits and other things, that total compensation actually maybe doesn't make it advantageous salary-wise to move somewhere else, or maybe the salary is lower that somebody's offering, but if you're able to get those details on the total compensation, that can at least help give a few other decision points.
I completely agree, and I'm glad that you mentioned that. I think looking at the big picture is really the big first step. So the salary, the initial compensation is one piece of it, but again, benefits, retirement, paid time off, some of those things can be very different in different roles in different industries, especially depending on how big of a change you're thinking about making. I was recently working with somebody who was planning a career change from an organization that had no benefits. It was completely a zero benefit organization and a very high compensation, and making a shift into an organization that had robust benefits, but that salary, it's going to look different. And so kind of weighing out what the pros and cons are, what is it going to take to, make your ends meet, or what your general expectations are, so that you can look at the whole picture, I think is really important. And talking to an employer about your ability to see the whole picture and that you've evaluated all the aspects and you're not just focused on one line item like salary, I think keeps the communication open when you're negotiating an offer.
Sure. Well, we have lots of good questions coming in, and we'll keep trying to get through as many as possible. One of the ones that I'm looking at right now, if Jill has maybe one or two kind of high points for this one, because I hear this one a lot, regarding the job search. What if you've not been working for an extended period of time, and now you're jumping back into the search process? What's maybe like one or two high point tips you'd give?
Yeah, I recently had a conversation about this, and I think one of the things that I've seen that I think has been effective is not trying to hide the fact that there's been a gap or a career pause, or that attention has been spent elsewhere. And I remember, this goes back, maybe 15 years ago. I was a recruiter, and I was interviewing someone for a job, and the resume came in, and they had the right education, they had the right experience, but the most recent block on the resume said, Smith Family Operations Leader. And it was a 7-year period where this person stayed home and took care of everything related to the family, but they put it out there, so it was no secret whatsoever, and took the time to articulate what skills they were using during that time that were still professionally relevant, like managing a budget, like coordinating many moving schedules and calendars. I think there are some creative ways. You don't want to take up a lot of real estate on your resume to talk about those things, but to just have an answer for that gap or that question in your resume and in your story, I think is really important. And hiding it, I think, just leaves people wondering, like, well, why is this missing? And I think transparency is really key in that situation as well.
Yeah, I'd agree. The more transparent, or the more you can help the person who's reviewing your cover letter and resume connect the dots.
Absolutely.
It's just easier. Jill, could you talk a little more about kind of that marketing brochure idea that you had, particularly what rubrics should it include?
Sure. So I don't necessarily think in terms of rubrics. So I'll talk maybe more about categories. For me, it's categories. And I like that question. So that means, at least for somebody out there, they're thinking about doing something about that suggestion. I would say you still want to have a summary. Much like we talked about, is that a value on the resume? It's definitely a valuable piece on the profile. So I would have some type of summary, maybe a paragraph. I think that here's also where it makes a lot of sense to have competencies or high-level skills summary, skills inventory. There's lots of different category names that you can give to it. But this is where you would list out, if you're in technology, the different languages, coding languages and things like that you might want to list out there. Again, it's kind of like keyword, kind of buzzy space where you would want to put in words that matter for the field that you're in or trying to get into. I've also seen a great use of space on that brochure or profile on like professional associations and community involvement. So if you're getting involved in these different professional organizations, or you get the chance to join a committee because you're really engaged in trying to learn more about what that field and profession is all about, get that stuff listed. Again, in another section on that profile, just to show that you're actively engaged in contributing to the field and increasing your knowledge. I think those things can be really important. There is, I think, an important space too to talk about, where you've worked. So a little small section on employment history without all the bullets and all the resume stuff, and just state kind of dates and places. It can be important there too. Of course, you're going to have an education section. And so it's kind of like puzzle pieces, building it together on a one page to give kind of a reflection of who you are today, and especially what you're capable of in the future.
Another kind of a different question. Can you suggest tools to reveal personal values and align them with a future career? So I think maybe some of those career assessments that you work with a lot.
Yeah, there are a handful of tools, and I wish I had the website I could just rattle off the top of my head, but I want to say it's UPenn. I'd have to go back and think about it, but there is a research site that's education related that has a bunch of free assessments that people can go out and use, and coaches can use, and you can get some really closely tied to values. I certainly have some tools and activities that I use with people that help pull out values. And yeah, I think we're there, John. You found it. Authentic Happiness is at the University of Pennsylvania. There are some great tools that people can use there. It looks like John's gonna share that. So anyway, yeah, that helped me. That has helped me in working with people. I have another there are different values inventories and tools that professionals and coaches use with people. And I think maybe to where this point was going, many people find that they're at this point in their career, 15 or 20 years in, and they're looking for a change because either they never had a strong values alignment with organizations they've worked with, or the organization over time has changed. And now the values alignment isn't as strong as it once was. And so it's very common for people to want to find, sacrifice in some cases, title or salary to have that feeling of my values align very strongly with the organization's mission, vision, and values, and I want to be a part of this. So being really clear on one's own values and the importance of that for finding fit and culture actually, I think, can go a long way in landing the right fit, because it can frame the questions that you might ask the employer while you're in the interview process. It's a lens through which you can sift through the questions that they might be asking you to sense if there's a right fit.
Someone wrote in, because it looks like they maybe missed the first few minutes of the webinar, and you might have just touched on this a few minutes ago, but just what are any of the significant difference between that marketing profile piece and what's on a resume, and maybe just some of the just important distinguishers in your mind between those two things?
Yeah, I would say, think of the standard resume categories as just a place to start, and shrink them down into really bite-sized pieces. And depending on your own individual situation, if you are trying to make a change, use that marketing brochure as a way to amp up and highlight the things that are relevant for this change that you're trying to make. So if you're trying to switch industries, or you're trying to switch fields altogether, like being a teacher to becoming a nonprofit leader or something like that, or a consultant, use that marketing brochure in those categories to highlight what you are instead of what you aren't. So again, looking at the future, the skills that you have and the capabilities, I would say, the profile, the education, the community involvement or professional associations, any volunteerism would fall into that category, and employment history, I think, just as a quick snapshot, are important pieces for that overall summary page.
Mm-hmm. The one of the folks who had asked about online courses, Coursera, Data Camp. I don't know if you have any other opinions on that. One other alum on the webinar did write in, and this was his take on Data Camp, that he's done hundreds of hours of courses on Data Camp, but has learned that a lot of companies require many years of experience with programming and data analytics skills, so it's very hard to get in a foot in the door in those industries. So that was that person's take on Data Camp. Anything with like other online courses, Coursera, things like that can help complement a resume or job search, or kind of trying to fill in those blanks with certain skills?
Yeah, I think specifically if you're looking to gain some skills or move into a field or an industry where you don't have hands-on experience, that definitely will separate you from others who aren't taking the time or resources to get up to speed on a certain type of technology. I don't think it replaces experience directly, but I think it helps you tell the story of, I'm so interested in this field that, by the way, I do this in my spare time, right? I study this stuff. I'm learning programming languages. I'm doing this because I'm that interested and curious in it. And back to my comment earlier, if you can find actual projects, whether that's by volunteer or by PTA or some other type of organization where you can bring that to them, I think that could help them see the connection and show, then you have some experience to speak of, especially when we're talking about those kind of highly technical PhD roles, trying to get into consulting, management consulting firms. I don't have my own experience to show me that Data Camp or Coursera courses will open a lot of doors there. Maybe it does, and maybe I just don't know that. Where I've seen it work, quite honestly, is in an MBA, which is kind of a different path to getting to that end result.
Okay. A follow-up question on kind of that salary research. As far as doing your research on expected salary, what websites or other resources should one use to do that research?
Yeah, so a couple of things come to mind, and anything you find online, I always encourage people to take with a grain of salt, because most employers would say that's not valid benchmarking for them. So of course you can go to salary.com, you can go to glassdoor.com, and you'll start to get some information, but it doesn't necessarily jive with what the employer is using. I've seen people get some good results out of business libraries that will purchase salary benchmark information from like the large HR consulting firms that publish this information. So companies, pay a membership to be a part of these benchmarking studies, and then the benchmark, the organizations will come back and tell back to the organization, here's what the range is for these types of roles, and it helps organizations make decisions on whether or not they're being competitive and if they need to move their salary ranges and so forth. And so I have seen some of those research studies available through business libraries. That might mean you have to go out of your way to go find that or get your hands on that information, but that I think would be fairly validated and an effective way to do some of that comparing.
Yeah, and I know I just was visiting with an alumna who works down at the, I believe it's the James J. Hill Business Library in downtown St. Paul. So if we have people in the Twin Cities, I know that they have both, obviously, the physical library, but then also different online resources too. And depending if you're still at the student at the University of Minnesota, and I don't know off the top of my head, I know there's some level of library access for Alumni Association members. So there might be some different databases and access from there as well. But especially if you're still a current student here, definitely leverage those librarians in whatever discipline you're in, because they will know a heck of a lot of stuff. We have about 10 minutes left, so if you still have any burning questions, feel free to submit them. Here's one kind of about social networking. If you're introduced to someone via LinkedIn or email, how long should you wait for a response before reaching out to them if they don't respond initially?
Yeah. I'm in favor of believing that most people are very busy, and not everyone uses all tools equally, right? So I interact with some people who don't use email as much as I do. Some people certainly don't check LinkedIn as often as I do, or don't use it as a regular tool. So I think it's safe to kind of wait a little bit And by a little bit, my rule of thumb is probably 2 weeks. So if you're active in a job search and you don't have a spreadsheet that's basically working as your CRM, you might need one, because you've got to flag those types of follow-ups, or it can get lost in the shuffle. So I would follow up with them again in whatever format was initially introduced, whether that's an email or LinkedIn. And then I would try the other. So if you're introduced over email and you don't get a response, then try them on LinkedIn. Or ideally, find someone else that you might have in common. So if it wasn't a warm introduction, see if you can create a warm introduction. So LinkedIn is great for that, John, as you all know, because you can go out and find out we know someone in common. Maybe you can go to that mutual friend or colleague and say, hey, I was, introduced to this person, and I'm wondering if you can help me kind of move the conversation along. Would you be willing to do that for me? Give them a reason why. Most people want to be helpful, but make sure they understand your motives. And I think that can be really helpful. And I know it's so hard to wait 2 to 3 weeks, but I think that's sort of my general guideline so that we don't come across as needy or pushy.
Yeah, gosh, there's some book I remember, it's by this guy out of like North Carolina, Steve Dalton. It was about, if I think of it here, it was about networking, but like he kind of had a kind of 80-20 rule, or there's only going to be a certain amount of people who will follow up, and you just kind of gotta accept that and just move on, because there's a lot of other people to network with, make connections, and remember, kind of like Jill mentioned, with like professional associations or alumni associations. I mean, the U of M has 466,000 alumni worldwide. Over 200,000 of our alumni and students have profiles on LinkedIn. And those are things like, go to linkedin.com/alumni and just do a lot of, there's some buttons where you can kind of do some data dives as far as, show me people who work at Target who studied marketing while they were here. I mean, you can really, it's instructive for career paths. It can be instructive as far as reaching out to folks. The one thing I would also say just with, LinkedIn is, customize your invitations. Let the person know why you really want to reach out versus just some kind of random thing. And especially with mobile versions of these tools, it's kind of a push and play thing, but, it doesn't necessarily let you customize. So as you're able to customize invitations and messages, do that, because that will really help the person on the other end know why you're wanting to connect, and then that's why it's great to connect in person.
I think we see it there. Is that this? Hi, Elizabeth.
Hi, Elizabeth. Thanks.
Steve Dalton's 2-hour job search. That's the resource that John was referring to there.
Of course. Thank you, Elizabeth. And I'll put in a plug for Elizabeth Craig. She's an alumna and also a great career coach as well. And she's done a webinar with us before. And so thank you, Elizabeth. I knew it was just on the tip of my tongue.
John, I see a question here I'd like to respond to. So what if you've spent some time building some new skills, but you haven't really applied them, right? So maybe it's through Coursera, maybe you're doing some other things to build some skills, and you haven't really applied them in projects or for another employer. How can you include them on your resume or on your marketing profile? And as I read that question, it got me thinking about, maybe an approach that a person could take here. It might be you have a skills area or a skills inventory, and you might have like expertise, and you might have emerging skills, right? And so you can put that you have some skills that you've been developing over time, but they're maybe just not as refined or perfected or applied as some of the other ones. And so you might find yourself, if you're in that situation and you're learning new skills because you want to move into a different type of role, maybe it makes sense for you in your marketing profile to highlight that as separate skill areas, emerging skills and more tested or expert skill areas.
And a friend on the webinar also mentioned Minnesota's DEED. I think it's the Department of, I forget it.
Employment
and Economic Development. The DEED website has a good career profile for some salary information too. And yeah, actually for those job seekers out there, the state of Minnesota and its agencies is, I think it's mncareers.gov maybe, but they've totally overhauled their job search function, and I know that they're also looking for talent too, so that's kind of another thing as well. One question I had, Jill, was, let's say you've gotten to that second round interview, you have the interview. What's kind of the appropriate follow-up execution kind of in that area between, like, I've just wrapped up the interview to I'm waiting to hear if they offer me the job?
Yeah, so that's the toughest period of time, I think, sometimes in the whole process. That's a real waiting game, because now you've kind of done everything you can, and it's in someone else's hands. I would say, first and foremost, whatever you can do, don't leave that last interview or that last scenario without asking what sort of time frame are they looking at for making a decision, because that will give you more sleep at night if they don't call you back the next day, because you thought things went really well and you got the impression that they're going to be making a decision quickly, but you really don't know the whole picture, or how many hoops and loops they need to go through to get their offer tidied up, or maybe there's another interview or a candidate who's coming in, but they couldn't get there for another few days. And so it'll just stress you out unnecessarily if you don't get at that information. You have every right to ask somebody what's their decision-making timeline, when they think they might be getting back to people. And whatever they say, you will honor and you will respect. And you might just say, is it okay if I check in with you? If that time has come and I haven't heard from you, I may just check in because I'm so excited about this opportunity. I really see a strong fit between what you're trying to accomplish and what I can bring to the role. So never miss that opportunity to sell yourself and show them how interested you are. And if that time comes and goes and you still haven't heard anything, it's perfectly appropriate to check in and say, I'm just checking in. We spoke 2 weeks ago, wondering if you've made a decision. As I've been doing my own reflection and thinking about the role, again, your opportunity to show them again why you're a good fit. And you can do that with anyone you've met in that interview process, not necessarily just the hiring manager or just a recruiter, or however that organization might be structured. I think it's also important at that stage to just stay on the radar.
We're wrapping up towards the end. You read a lot or have a lot of kind of experience with different resources. What are either some books that you often recommend to people, or kind of great resources, whether for inspiration or just tactical tips that, what are maybe like 2 or 3 that come to mind for you?
Yeah, that's great. Practical tips, resources, tools. There's a lot of good career books out there. It's hard to bring it down. I think William Aruta's books on branding, personal branding, and how to articulate your skills are among the best. If that's something that you're not currently have an eye on, especially if you're career changing, how do you identify your skills in a brand that represents you? I think those are some good ones. This one's a little bit more of an oldie but a goodie. I like Working Identity by Romania Ibarra. That one really gets at this sort of crux of making a change and really trying to figure out who you are and your purpose and finding fulfillment in that area. I like so many. It's kind of hard to narrow it down specifically. I'm just now reading Thrive by Arianna Huffington myself. I think there's a lot of good advice in there about again, that connection between who you are and what you want out of this life and what's meaningful to you, and getting to that place of being able to thrive personally and professionally. So those are a few that are just right off the top of my head.
Cool. Thank you. And if people are interested in following up with you, what's kind of the best way to connect?
Well, my contact information is not all up there on the screen, but you can certainly get to my website. You can check out leader_refinery on all of the social media avenues and find us there. We're on Twitter. We share via Facebook. And I think that there's a lot of meaningful information out there. I try to cull through all the noise and put some interesting career and leadership information out there. So find me on LinkedIn, find Leadership Refinery on Facebook, go to the website. You can always contact me through there. And if I'm not the right career coach or leadership coach for you, I certainly have a network of others, and I'm happy to pay it forward and find the right fit for people who feel stuck.
Yeah, and I apologize if the content looks like the PowerPoint sucked out the contact information.
Yeah, my email address is jill@leadershiprefinery.com. And again, if you can contact me either through email or via the website, you'll definitely get me.
Cool. Well, thank you so much, Jill, for sharing your time and insights today with our online audience, and thanks to everybody who made time to join us over the noon hour. Oh, okay, there it is. Sorry, it was just a few clicks here as far as advancing the slide. So I'll just leave it up for a few more seconds here. But again, thank you for everyone who joined us today. In closing, members of the University of Minnesota Alumni Association make initiatives like this webinar series possible. And again, thank you for your support. And if you'd like to join us, just visit umnalumni.org/membership. That's all today. Everyone out there, have a wonderful holiday season. If you get some time off work, spend it with some friends and family and relax. And we will catch you after the new year. And keep your eyes peeled to our website and email for future webinars that will be coming up. So have a great day.